This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the May 4th edition of the DRF Players Podcast, the Oaks Day Special. I'm your host, Thomas Fornatale, back with you alongside at DRF Formulator Mike Hogan and at UT Big Hair Jonathon Kinchen. Gentlemen, how are you doing on this fine Derby week?
It's Derby week. What can you say? It's exciting. We got the draw later today. The Oaks draw was yesterday. A really big card for Oaks Day, and I'm imagining Derby Day will be exactly the same. It looks like a lot of good races lining up, and should be a really fun weekend.
Jonathon, how did your travel plans down to Louisville go? Did you have to route through 3 different cities? Was this an example of hashtag Stand By Life, or did you make it smoothly?
Flawless. It was a flawless victory. I made it here with no issues, and it's going to be a good week when you get somewhere and you start hearing people tell you Happy Derby. It always gets me fired up. So the rest of the crew is en route, so I'm sure they'll be here later today, and things will start to get interesting.
Does this mean we have to downgrade you in your next start after the perfect trip this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, leaving here is going to be a nightmare, and it always is. I've left Derby from Nashville, Indianapolis, and in the past. I've actually only left from Louisville one time in my 8-year Derby adventure. So that leaving is usually a tragic situation, but not always.
We used to do the wise guy route of leaving through Cincinnati. We would enter and exit through Cincinnati. Susan and I did every Derby from, I think, 98 to 2003 before we got too old, basically, to deal with the grind of travel to the Derby. But yeah, Cincy was a good way to go, except for the one year that we ended up trying to fly out on the day of, like, the Cincinnati Marathon or something. It's like the Flying Pig Marathon they have up there, and the traffic and the this and the that. Anyway, we end up missing our flight and having to, it was insane. We ended up, like, flying back to Philly and driving to New York. It was positively uncivilized. But other than that one year, the Cincinnati hack is a pretty good way to go. I suppose with you and your travel situation, you don't have so much control, and it's more of a wing it thing. But what are your plans like the next few days? Are you going to be going to the races? Or are you just going to be holed up in a room handicapping with a green visor on? What's the situation?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna track today a little bit. Today will be the kind of low key, pick your spots, enjoy adult beverages, catch up with friends situation. Tonight, dinner with our friend John Nichols. Tomorrow, track with the whole crew will be here tomorrow, and then the battle starts with Friday and Saturday. I don't ever go out Friday night. Like, I'm so tired after Oaks and knowing what's ahead. I usually go to sleep pretty early. So, and then Saturday, of course, will be Derby. We typically don't go until the stakes races, but there's a horse I've been waiting to bet really bad. So I'm hoping he's going to be entered in the morning and the early card on Saturday. And if that happens, then I'm going to have to go. But we'll have to see if he gets entered or not. So
in case I forget to ask you on tomorrow's show, where we'll be going over the Derby undercard and Derby itself, who is this horse you're waiting for listeners' sake?
Well, I mean, the people that listen to this could care less about it because he's going to be super, super, super short price. But stay out. You better stay out of the pick 3 pool surrounding him. Everyone listening, my price gets messed up. I'm going to know whose fault it is. But it's a horse called the Player.
Gotcha, the Player, and will be a big player at short odds, hopefully for you, in one of the undercard races on Saturday. You know, his father's nickname is Dusty, and the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree, folks. Jonathon Kinchen giving out another odds-on shot here on the DRF Players Podcast. But we love him, and we understand, and we've seen him in the past be able to take some of these shorter-priced horses and construct smart bets or smart tournament strategies where he ends up cashing big on these horses. And frankly, that's a lesson I think a lot of horse players could learn, is how to continue to use some of these shorter prices to our advantage. Mike, you wrote a fun piece about Derby stats on DRF.com. I don't want to give away the whole thing, but tell me one thing that you learned in putting together the piece about the Derby stats that surprised you.
Well, the surprising thing is, and I think this is probably just a little bit of an anomaly rather than something to hang your hat on and key your wagers around, but surprisingly no horse, and I only have charts rather back to 1963, which is probably a fair enough sample size, and I don't even know if anything prior to 63 would really be all that useful from a wagering or analysis standpoint. But anyway, back to 1963, no horse has won from the 14 post in the Derby. So take that for what you will. 0 for 42. That was a little surprising to me, but not really one that I'm going to worry about if my horse gets that gate on Saturday.
We will talk more about Derby posts and the Derby in general tomorrow for sure. But Mike, let me ask you, anything interesting, newsworthy going on around Churchill? Obviously, we have a crack team of reporters down there bringing you all the action, workout reports, etc. But I'm just curious if there's anything in particular that folks need to know, or anything that broke today that I might have even missed. I've just been holed up looking at PPs all morning and writing my article about the Public Handicapper Challenge.
Not really. I mean, I think the just the kind of the usual from the lead up of earlier in the week and from last week. I guess Lonnie is a very strange horse, and they've got unconventional methods for working him in the morning, and Mohamed seems to want to run off, and all the stuff that I keep hearing from all the morning clocker reports and every day when all the horses get out on the track. But from what I can tell, it doesn't sound like anybody is working so strongly or so poorly that you'd want to upgrade or downgrade based on the works, unlike some years where there was just such a standout. I think Animal Kingdom in 2011 might come to mind, that you had to upgrade based on what you were hearing in the morning, but it doesn't seem to be the case this year, but who knows.
I had heard good things about the way Mohamed was working. What are you saying about him trying to run off? Where was that reported, and what? Give me a little more on that.
Maybe runoff is a little extreme, but he seems like he's very prominent and eager, and some people were even thinking that he might be a little bit more forwardly placed or on the bridle early and even contesting the early pace based on what they're seeing in the morning.
Okay, so not a negative. I hear running off, I think, a negative, but that's not what you were.
No. I mean it more like inability or maybe even by design, less willingness to harness the speed.
Yeah, more on the bridle, like you said. All right, the Public Handicapper Challenge starts on Friday. That's the subject of my article today. I really feel like anyone listening to this podcast should be playing in this contest. It's free. If you're an NHC Tour member, which costs just $50, you get a chance to win an NHC seat for free. Not too many opportunities to do that. You can subsidize the cost of your membership even with discounts on DRF PP plans. Also, you get discounts on DRF PPs simply by signing up for the Public Handicapper Challenge on publichandicapper.com. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a lot of fun. Public Handicapper generally provides the topics that we tackle on the podcast, so if you like the podcast, it's a good way to follow along and be able to make fun of us when we miss wildly with a pick, or give us a little attaboy when we connect. So I definitely recommend that folks check that out. Jonathan, are you going to be playing in that? Is this going to be a vehicle by which you'll be looking to get some NHC Tour points and defend your tour title?
Absolutely, yeah. This year's the first, or this last time last Public Handicapper round they had was the first time I actually got a significant amount of picks in, because I was smart enough to set my alarm every Saturday for like 10:30 a.m. It says put in Public Handicapper picks, so I always remember to do it now. I used to forget. So
here's an idea.
I would recommend doing that for sure.
Whoever the geniuses are that run that DRF Tournaments Twitter account should probably send that out as a tweet every week. And then if you're playing in PH and you're afraid you're going to miss the pick, you can set up the notification so you get that as a text on Saturday, and it reminds everybody. Maybe that's an idea worth pursuing for those folks, whoever they are. So, all right, that's it for my little plug for the PH Challenge. Lots of contest action in the DRF universe this weekend. Check out all the sites, nhcqualify.com, bcqualify.com, drfqualify.com, and clearly the focus of action in contests, wherever they're being played, is going to be this Kentucky Oaks undercard. I've had a chance to look through it quickly. Mike, I believe you said you've just glanced at it. And Jonathon, you told me you don't even need PPs to come up with your picks for this. What do you mean by that?
Well, I just meant one race. Like, I was anxiously awaiting the pre-entries, and I already knew an exacta box that I was going to play regardless. It's going to be short, but it's a stakes race. It's a big field. Well, not a big field, but a nice enough field. But I think that Stage Play and Karina Mia both are going to be so hard to beat. I don't know which one is going to be better. I still probably need to dive into the PPs to figure that part of it out. Probably Karina Mia, but those two horses cutting back. I think Stage Play has been screaming to get cut back forever, and they're finally getting that now. It was kind of a decision that had already been made even before they drew, but nothing happened in the draw that changes the way I feel. So hopefully the Baffert will take a little bit of money to kind of help me with the price a little bit there. I would imagine that Asmussen's other horse, Nickname, will take some money, but in that race for me, I'm really excited about watching Karina Mia in Stage Play and trying to find a way to take those two short price horses and turn them into a little bit of value.
Yeah, Karina Mia for me in that race, which goes as the seventh, the 8 bells on Friday's Oaks undercard. I think she just leaps off the page to me as short price single material at something to the tune of 4 to 5. When your cut back horse also seems to have a pace advantage, that's pretty powerful. Now, were you thinking more along the lines of a box exacta, or is this also a race where you try to get real skinny in the picks?
Yeah, no, I'll try to be real skinny in the picks. I mean, obviously I have some work to do, but it feels like the type of spot where I would use Karina Mia as like a lone A and then use Stage Play as like a lone B, which I think if you can do that when you're doing a multi-race ticket maker type of situation, you can really, that actually allows you to hit the ticket a few more times because you're really skinny. A lot of times we'll single horses as single A's, but then we use 3 or 4 B horses, and you end up spending, still a significant amount of money when that happens. And so it'd be a situation where I would try to do that, and then I'd probably do a weighted exacta more than like a box exacta. So I would go like, I think they're the 5 and the 7. I'm not looking at it directly, but I would do like a depending on what your budget is, I would do like a $150 $150 exacta 5-7 and a $50 exacta 7-5 or something, where either way you're gonna get about the same return back based on the price that it pays, or maybe adjust that a little bit either way.
Yeah, that sounds like a very sensible approach. Let's back up though for a second and just talk fast about the 6th race on Friday, the La Troyenne, a mile and a 16th, Grade 1 for fillies and mares. To me, looking at that race quickly, it seemed like it was going to be awfully hard to beat the favorites, number 1, Carolina, and especially number 2, Sheer Drama, coming off that win in the Madison. Did either of you guys have a horse you were waiting for come back in this race other than those two?
No, I didn't. The thing about this race that I've learned in the past, and it's happened to me, it happens a lot, and at least it feels like it has. I want to look back and double check, but it seems like there's always a horse that has recent form that I gravitate to, and then one of these comeback types jumps up and bites me in this race every year, and it's happened quite a bit. But when a horse like Sheer Drama wins their prep race doing something that they don't exactly want to do, and now they're doing what they want to do, second off a layoff, it's like one of those things that's like just play the horse and move on. And it feels like this pick 5 or pick 6 is going to be pretty chalky early. It feels like Sheer Drama into Karina Mia is an easy way to get started.
The pick 6 does start with race 6, so that you could potentially get started with something very skinny, and then if that strategy happens to blow up in your face, you can play the pick 4 back, starting with race 8, the turf sprint. We've talked about a lot of turf sprints on the show lately. They seem to turn up on Public Handicapper fairly often. And Jonathon, these are the kind of races where I think that strategy you mentioned last week on the podcast when we were talking about our methodology of handicapping the field, not from number 1 to number 10, but from who you project to be first at the pace call or even the quarter, and then working your way backward through the field. I feel like that's a pretty cool strategy to work in terms of handicapping turf sprints. Mike, in general for you, when you're looking at a turf sprint, what are you looking for? How does your handicapping change in these very specialized races?
Well, I'm looking for usually a forwardly placed horse that's shown speed and shown the ability to win at or around the distance. You can think of a few exceptions. Free as a Bird, for instance, comes to mind. But in generally, these races don't favor those coming from way out of the clouds. So I want someone that's going to be either on or near the lead, and ideally one that's shown, there's not a whole lot of, I don't really feel like there's a whole lot of class difference between, the graded stakes and the listed stakes. So I'm okay with one moving up in class that's shown good form and shown that they can win at this distance and on those kinds of surfaces. I also look for ones that seem to want either firm or soft turf, because I noticed number 1, Power Alert, is in this race, was beaten favorite last out, has run his better races on the Gulfstream turf, on the firm turf, has not done as well on softer ground, and the Gulfstream turf is almost like a freeway sometimes. So I think if there's any softness in the ground, I would look to play against a horse like Power Alert.
What are we hearing in terms of the weather report for both Friday and Saturday? Have either of you guys looked at that?
Yeah, it's supposed to be beautiful on Friday and Saturday. I think that there's some speculation there might be a little bit of rain today, but not a significant amount in which it's going to affect racing Friday and Saturday, from what I understand. But I've also been known to make it rain at Del Mar and Santa Anita. So I have a shot at screwing this up somehow. I'm just hoping that I don't.
You are a total weather jinx. I mean, I've sat with you twice in the Logan Suite when rain poured down, once to the point where they actually had to cancel the races. So, folks, if there is an unexpected shower to rain on the Parade, Oaks, or Derby Day, you know who caused it. Jonathan, did you look at this turf sprint at all? Have you had a chance to dig into this one yet?
No, I haven't had a chance to dive all the way into it, but I do have some interesting points. I think that when you look at these races, like Mike said, the thing about turf sprints to me that I think is the most important thing is that where they happen and the distance in which they happen at, because every track runs them at a different distance. For instance, Keeneland's at 5.5, Gulfstream's at 5, Santa Anita's at 6.5, and so I think that when you're looking at these turf sprints and these turf sprinters, you have to evaluate exactly what they do well. Like, for instance, we all know that the Keeneland turf course is different. It's got a sandier base. I'm not a horticulturist, but I've heard that before. So I think that you have to understand that if a horse is closing at Keeneland and runs well closing at Keeneland, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to run well at Churchill going 5 instead of 5.5, because now it's a shorter distance. So I think you have to really actually analyze how the horse will perform today on this surface at this distance, and actually not get caught up in just a horse's previous performance. Like you said, sprinting at Gulfstream is just a completely different game. With all that said, I'm going to find the speed of the speed, and I guarantee whoever the speed of the speed is will be an A horse for me, going 5 on the turf at any racetrack. So I don't care if the horse is 25-1. If it's the speed of the speed, I'll use that horse as an A horse, and then I'll just work backwards. I think it's interesting to see Hootenanny back in here, promising 2-year-old that has been kind of spotty from times, but obviously showed some talent as a young horse. But hopefully he'll take a lot of money, and we can find some prices elsewhere. Maybe Rocket Heat. I wanted him last time going 5.5 at Keeneland. Maybe he didn't like the surface. He's a potential speed of the speed type. And then Power Alert won this race last year, so he's also one you might want to keep an eye on.
I was going to mention Rocket Heat as that potential speed of the speed, this time drawn a little more inside. Something Extra is a friend of the podcast and a horse who I always like and will probably end up on some multi-race tickets. And while I totally agree with you guys about looking to the speed and speed of the speed, typically in a multi-race setting, I will want to reach for whoever I deem the best closer is. In this case, maybe that's summation time, drawn inside with Castellano, maybe improves a little bit second off the layoff. Doesn't have that course form that Jonathon was saying is so important, but has done well 4 or 5 in the exacta at the specific distance of 5 furlongs. Just a few to throw out there as maybe to include in your multi-race wagers. Let's talk quickly about the Ali Sheba, Grade 2. We got a few horses we've talked at length about on the podcast in the past in this race, including Eagle. Jonathon, in terms of multis, anything leaping out to you here as an approach? Are you looking at this as more of a spread race or a skinny race?
This is a hard race for me to look at for a couple of reasons. One is because last year I had Noble Bird, if you look down in his PPs, at 19-1 in the pick 5 that I would have had for like $3 when he headed Protonico. Protonico had blinkers on. I'll never forget it. He headed Protonico. Protonico clearly didn't see him. He headed him just a little bit too early. Protonico came back and beat him. I missed the pick 5 when I could have had it for. It would have been a nice start to an already great weekend. But so that's hard for me to look down and see his name.
We all know what happened Saturday. We know what happened Saturday last year, so we don't want to listen to your whining.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm back on the Top Billing bandwagon. I thought Top Billing has kind of shown some life again. I know he was always meant to be a good horse, and hopefully he can get a little bit of pace to run at. I think Noble Bird will show speed again. Hopefully there's something else in here. Like I said, I hadn't dove all the way in. Cat Burglar obviously will show a little bit of pace from Bob Baffert shipping out from California. And I think that Top Billing might be able to get back involved. I am a little bit sad. I was looking forward to seeing one of the coolest horses in training run. Apparently he had an issue and didn't get to make it, but I wanted to see Regally Ready. I saw that he was nominated. I was excited to see him run. But yeah, no, I think I'm going to lean on Top Billing a little bit. I think Eagle has bigger plans. I thought they were going to skip this race to get ready for other races down the line, so maybe I'll look for him next time.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Did you have anything here, Mike, that you noticed, or any horses you've been waiting on?
No, I was just going to mention Top Billing. There was a time when I think a lot of people saw him as the 2014 Kentucky Derby winner, right?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
There was a little bit of buzz about that, yeah.
I mean, he was favored in the Fountain of Youth. He ran 3rd behind Wildcat Red and General A-Rod. This was a horse who was favored in every one of, 3 of his 4 first 4 career starts. Had a year layoff and then hadn't won since January of 2014 until the race last month at Keeneland. He's one that has always been, I think, a lot of potential, and a lot of people have been really high on him for a while, and maybe now he's starting to put it together at seemingly a big price. He'll be jumping up from allowance company to grade 1 company, which is always tough to do, but or grade 2 company, I'm sorry. But you'll get the price if he's anything like the horse that a lot of people thought he was back in 2014.
The penultimate race we're going to discuss today is the Edgewood, a grade 3 for 3-year-old fillies, going 1 mile and a 16th on the turf. And I think that a lot of people are going to look at this race and see it as primarily a 3-horse affair between number 1, Harmonized, number 5, Ava's Kitten, and number 10, Catch a Glimpse, who was so impressive at Keeneland last time. Does that sound about right to you for your multi-purposes, Jonathon, or is these are 3-year-old fillies? It's a grass race. Is this a place where you think you might spread and try to catch a price?
Well, I think that obviously Catch a Glimpse is the class of this group, but I think it's interesting to notice, and I'm not 100% familiar with the turf course at Churchill, but if I'm not mistaken, just from Breeders' Cups, I think that it's kind of a short turn in a mile 16 turf race to the first run. I think there's kind of a short run up to the first turn.
At Breeders' Cup, it was exaggerated because they were running a mile with a big run up, but I think it was kind of even the mile and a 16th, you could get hung out there if things don't go your way. If you were Florence Giroux, how would you deal with that situation? Would you go ahead and just send from the outside with Catch a Glimpse?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would send with Catch a Glimpse, but the tricky part, I think, is that we have, I think, is the horse outside of him, the 11 horse. We have the newly revitalized Julien Leparoux, who seems to put every horse he has on the lead and win stakes races, is drawn from the same barn right outside of Catch a Glimpse, and I feel like, that horse's best chance is to go forward as well, and it feels like they both have to kind of go and to the detriment of each other. So I think that's interesting development that could happen on the outside. I'm interested a little bit in this Doug O'Neill horse, Jeremy's Legacy. That horse made a move at Del Mar this summer that was just unreal. First time U.S. And I've kind of been following the horse a little bit since. Ran into a horse that I was really excited about betting last time, decked out, ran second. So I might give Jeremy's Legacy a little look in there, shipping in from California. Sometimes you can find horses that are out in California that actually don't appreciate the firm going and have been looking for something a little bit softer. And sometimes when they come back out to the East Coast, you can see them move up a little bit.
That's an interesting point about Jeremy's Legacy. Mike, did you have anything on the Edgewood, or should we move it right along to the Kentucky Oaks?
Yeah, I just had one quick thing to say about the Edgewood. Don't count out a horse like number 7 Outsider Art, who last race was returning from a long layoff for veteran trainer Jonathon Shepard. In the first start off that layoff was a big price and ran behind Catch a Glimpse and Ava's Kitten, was maybe a little more forwardly placed than she normally would be, might get a little bit more pace to run at than she saw in the Appalachian. In the second start off the layoff, if she moves forward at all, she could be a player to either upset things or certainly hit the board at a pretty nice price.
I'm glad you mentioned Outsider Art, actually, Mike, because I loved on paper going into the Appalachian. That was a day that Jonathon and I were both at Caneland, actually, and I went down to the paddock to look at her, and she didn't look the way I expected her to. She was getting pretty hot and bothered, had kidney sweat, and was hot on the shoulder on a 70-degree day. It was almost like being back off. She was getting a little worked up the way that horses sometimes do off the layoff. So I actually ended up not using her in my bets, and she ran, as you point out, pretty well. Perhaps more relaxed, looking a little more composed, second off a layoff. You could see a better version of Outsider Art. So I think that's a really interesting point, and one that I'll certainly be taking a look for in the Edgewood, in addition to Catch a Glimpse and Harmonize, for me, just sort of the other obvious one who'll be on the multi-race tickets. Let's move on to the Oaks, guys. This is a race I assume we've actually had a chance to handicap somewhat properly, just because we've kind of been handicapping it for weeks and in earnest since the defection of the would-have-been odds-on favorite Songbird. Mike, why don't we start with you? If you had to make a bet in the Kentucky Oaks with the information you have now, who would be your key horse or horses? Or should I say filly or fillies?
Philly or fillies. The tough thing with this race, I mean, you mentioned it's a much more wide-open race now with the defection of Songbird. The tough thing for me is figuring out who's going to get bet and how. I'm not sure I completely trust the morning line. I think that there are 2 horses that maybe are a little flip-flopped in the morning line. I don't think that Weep No More will be as short as 9-2. She was 30-1 last out against a lot of these rivals. I think a lot of people are going to try and make her prove that again against a bigger field, against maybe the same level. I just don't think she's going to get bet as heavily or as equally as say Catherine Sophia, who was your 1-2 favorite in that race and lost only by a half length. So I think she floats up. The other one that's appealing to me, especially if you get anything close to the morning line, is number 4, Go Maggie Go. 2 for 2 lifetime. Beat a pretty decent field in the Gulfstream Oaks. I think the sky's the limit for her. She could get a very good trip tracking the speed, but I don't think she's going to be anything close to 12-1.
let's go ahead. We have the we don't usually do this, but we have the time, and it's a race of such importance that I think it warrants this treatment. Let's go through and just talk through the field. I don't think we want to go on at any great length about every horse, but at least I'd love to take a little bit of temperature of you guys about the entirety of this field. And we'll start with number 1, Terra Promesa, nearly undefeated, seems to be very well fancied. Maybe not the easiest spot in this race at the rail. I don't know what to make, and I don't really like the rankness she showed last time. But are either of you guys considering making her part of your bets?
Well, the word rank and then the word 14 horse field, or the phrase 14 horse field, and then drawing the rail, like I don't have anything to do with that. I mean, what are they going to do? They have to either send her, which seems like going to be a tragedy. She doesn't want to be that forwardly placed, or they got to grab her and let 13 other horses come over on her, and then she's supposed to relax suddenly on the biggest crowd, in front of the biggest crowd she's ever raced against. No, I wouldn't want really much to do with that.
I think Stone Street has other better chances to win this race. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, she's interesting. I don't think she's one I would list near the top contenders. Maybe use her only most offensively in the multi-race wagers.
Let's move on to number 2, Weep No More. Mike tipped his hand a little bit about how he feels about her. I agree with Mike. I think that the 9-2 of the morning line seems very, very, very short here. I feel like this is still a big setup. Last time had the good setup. I just suspect that last time was the time, and there's probably better closers in this field. Jonathan, am I missing anything? I mean, I feel bad that she's a friend of the podcast. She gave us that nice win on the pod back in the Suncoast, but I'm not sure I can be picking her in the Kentucky Oaks.
No, I mean, for me, it's like I thought she got a setup that day. Our good friend Nick Tamro pointed out when we were having a discussion the other night that race, the first quarter didn't seem like it was that fast, but that middle quarter, similar to American Pharoah's Travers, was really, really fast. And Weep No More got a brilliant ride by Corey. He just kept her way back there on the rail and then produced her late, and she ran by. And then she got a setup. She ran by Rachel's Valentina off a long layoff. Captain Sophia, who we'll talk about later, is a horse that doesn't want to run that far. And Karina Mia, who was off a long layoff. So she got a perfect setup. She got a huge middle quarter, and she was chasing down horses that all had a right to come back to her. And so I think it's a dressed-up performance, and I'll be fading her as much as possible, maybe down to at least third and trifectas and things like that.
Dressed up, one of the great Andy Serling-isms that's made its way into the racing lexicon, and for that I am grateful. I love that term. Number 3, Lewis Bay goes out for Chad Brown. Or you have more on this horse, Mike?
I was just going to say, before we move on, what do you think? I mean, I think we all agree that she's maybe not value at 9-2, but where, and I think we could probably all agree that she'll float up from that price, but where, if she floats enough, is there a point in which she becomes potential value?
Well, I think the answer to that question has to be yes, right? I mean, any horse in any race at a certain price would theoretically have to constitute value. But for me, I mean, I don't mean to be overly negative about a filly that I like, but I can't see the wagers that I'm planning on constructing for the race. I can't really see including her, and just in theory, 15-1 might be hello for me. I'm pretty skeptical here.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the question, like at what point does she become value? I mean, I guess she becomes value at 10-1, 12-1, but I don't want her, I wouldn't bet her to win at 20-1. I just don't, I don't allow the price to influence my decision making that much. And that's kind of why I focus more on multi-race bets, because I just want to pick winners, and I don't really want to get too caught up in that type of situation. Obviously, for tournaments, if she's 12-1, I just feel like there's other 12-1 shots I'd rather play. Like, I'd rather play Mocat at 30-1 or 25-1 or whatever she is. So I would say probably 12-1 is where she becomes a little bit more acceptable, but I wouldn't bet her either way.
Mike, how about you to answer that same question, interesting question that you posed?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say 12-1 she becomes interesting to me, because this is a horse that's never lost going 2 turns. Yeah, sure, you can maybe downgrade the effort last out, where she earned the 92 buyer. But, that she seems to be improving. She's somewhat lightly raced. There's a chance she could get a similar setup that would help her late kick. And I don't think she has no shot in here. I just think that if she's anywhere near that 9-2, she's definitely an underlay. But there's definitely a point where she becomes an overlay for me, and it might be at 10 or 12-1. So we'll see.
Let's move on to Lewis Bay, number 3, ridden by Irad Ortiz, trained by Chad Brown. Very interesting pedigree, good stalking style. The one thing that was sticking in my craw about her, looking over her PPs, was an idea that maybe she really moved up on that off-going at Aqueduct last time. Where do either of you guys stand on Lewis Bay?
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, when you look down at the PPs, you notice the two significant wins in stakes races were on off tracks. Yeah, it's tricky with young horses because you know if they've only been running on the slop, then that's what you're forced to have to evaluate, and it's hard to tell if they'll enjoy a dry surface. I will say that she's kind of the buzz horse that I've heard from the workout realms of how well she's working, and so. Based on her performance in the mornings over that track, I think it's safe to assume that she'll produce her best race. And if you think that her best race is good enough, then she's one that you would definitely want to consider. I would think at this point she's a type that I would use as an A type. Also one that I would use in the top spots of some trifecta combinations.
Mike, where are you with Lewis Bay?
I think Jonathan's a little more bullish on her than I am. She's a good filly. I just don't know if she's good enough to beat this field. I don't know. I don't love her. I guess I could see her winning, but I probably wouldn't really be leaning on her too heavily.
Number 4 is Go Maggie Go. It's never easy to win a graded stake off a maiden win. That's what she did last time. Takes another big step up here. And I'm assuming projects to be the speed from the inside here. I just think it's a too big of an ask in a race where I like so many others, so she's not really for me. Mike, we'll start with you on your thoughts with her. Where are you with Go Maggie Go?
Well, I already mentioned I like her, and again, the question becomes the price. I think I would probably use her maybe as an A or a B in here. I think that she's improving. She's only had 2 starts. I don't think we've seen her best yet. I don't see why she shouldn't handle the surface and the distance here. The question is just whether she's good enough in her 3rd career start to win the Kentucky Oaks. So I think that's why I would want probably close to the 12-1, but I doubt I would get it. In reality, I'd probably use her as a B in my multi-race bets.
Jonathan, what letter grade would you hang up next to Go Maggie Go, at least from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably going to be a B type of horse. I mean, I respect what she's done in 2 starts. That Gulfstream race is hard to evaluate. That track was so tricky that day, and obviously that's part of the reason Nyquist's performance is hard to evaluate exactly on a speed figure, from a speed figure standpoint. I trust Dale Romans, and I trust Dale Romans coming back to Churchill. I think he understands the way that track plays, being his home track. And I would expect her to run well. I just do think it's a little bit much, a little bit too quick. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think she's one that I would have to respect, but it's not one that I have a ton of confidence in.
Not sure we got to spend too much time on number 5, Dream Dance, who looks a little too slow. Though, for those of you who like wagers like the trifecta and the superfecta, has enough of a closing kick I could see at least including in the bottom of those bets at what projects to be a big number. Am I selling Dream Dance too short, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to young horses like this, one of the things I like to do is look and see what figures they were running as 2-year-olds and who they were running with. And if you look, she was right there next to a lot of really good horses that were considered, that were either graded stakes winners or horses that have been highly regarded on the Oaks Trail with Karina Mia, Stage Play, Go Mode, Dothraki Queen. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that her performances are a little bit, her figures are a little bit lower than I think we would all prefer them to be to put her on top. But she's the type that I would absolutely use in 2nd and 3rd of trifectas, even more so than a horse like Wheaton More because I think she provides so much more value than Weep No More. So, and she's the perfect type that will be taken back, make one run, and when all the other horses are getting tired from trying to run at horses earlier for a chance to win, she's the type that will pick up pieces for second and third at 45-1, and people are like, oh, why didn't I use that horse, blah, 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 blah. So I'll be using her underneath, but she's not one that I would use on top.
Perhaps a bottom-up super key type of a horse. Mike, where are you with Dream Dance?
I agree. I like her. Maybe she's good enough to win. I'm not sure, but at 30-1, I'd certainly include her in any of those multi-race bets. I think she's going to outrun the 30-1 odds. I think Jonathon's right. After she broke her maiden, they tried her in the Pocahontas. She was elevated up to second place money after running third in that race, taking a little bit of some bumping. They tried her in the Alcibiades, where she was behind some good horses. She ran second to Stage Play in the Rags to Riches. She was third behind Stage Play and then DQ'd from that race behind Karina Mia. She's running with, aside from Songbird, some of the best fillies of her generation. Now she's making her third start off of a layoff as a 3-year-old. One of the angles I like is the Beyer regression off the win, where she got the 75 last out running down a loose leader. I think it's a race that looks better, is better than it looks on paper, and I think she offers value in the race.
All right, now we got a positive call by Jonathon on number 6, Mocat, before. I didn't really see on paper, so I'm curious to hear the case. Was that just, hey, if I need to use a cap type horse, it might be Mocat, or do you really like something here?
Yeah, it's more of a as needed basis. I mean, I'll definitely use her underneath in trifectas and stuff like that. But like if I was in a tournament setting, that would be one that I would consider. I do know that just from hanging out in California a few times, that the bar has been very high on this horse, and she's a pretty good turf horse. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that they keep banging their head against the wall, running her on the dirt. Maybe they're figuring her out. But
she got a nice grade 1 placing last time for running
absolutely,
on the dirt.
Absolutely. So she's just the type that I think that is one that could get a piece of it. Flavion Pratt, who I like to affectionately call Flava Flav, it's like my favorite new jockey nickname. I think that he's an up-and-coming rider. I think that he's a smart guy that'll take her back, make one run with her, and she's the type that, at 40-1, 30-1, that can get a piece of it for sure. And in a tournament setting, she'd be one that I'd be interested in using if I was in trouble.
Look for the necklace with the clock in the paddock. Mike, what did you think of Mocat?
I think the angle, it's sort of the land over sea angle here, isn't it? She ran second to Songbird. She's not facing Songbird on Friday. The question is, can she turn the tables on Land Over Sea, who finished nearly 4 lengths ahead of her in the Santa Isabel? She's interesting. I don't love her, but I understand why Jonathon likes her, and maybe she's good enough to run second or third or fourth, but I'm not really going to be keying her to win.
Motamore has been beaten a couple of times by Lewis Bay. My first glance at the PPs, I was wondering how far she really wants to run. And that just brings me to a point I want to make about Uncle Mo. I can't remember if I made this point on the show the other week after we had the pleasure of going to visit Ashford Stud, courtesy of our friends at Coolmore America. And that is, while when Uncle Mo was running, I didn't think he really wanted to run 1.25 miles, say. Seeing the way he looks now, I'm pretty sure his kids will want to run 1.25 miles if he passes along any of the sort of size and strength he seems to have developed as an older horse at stud. He looked like a painting in a museum of a racehorse that would run at classic distances. Now, I'm not saying how that relates to a 3-year-old filly, Mo D'Amour, and I don't think she's good enough anyway. I just wanted to make that point about Uncle Mo's in general. Maybe it's going to take them a little bit longer. Maybe, who knows? But it wouldn't surprise me one bit to see that horse that we saw that day at Ashford produce a 10-furlong horse. Not at all. But, yeah, I don't really have too much on Mo D'Amour other than that little aside. Either of you guys have any preference for her?
Not really. I mean, I think the play here is it's sort of an in Todd we trust, isn't it? You're getting a big price on Todd Pletcher in the Kentucky Oaks, and you know,
won
that's
the race
worth
at $1 million
before.
to 1 before. Yeah.
Right. So you know, look, she's one who's only been out of the money once, you know, and that was in the Demoiselle against Lewis Bay back in November. If she shows up with she's going to have to improve, certainly, but if she shows up with a top effort here, I guess she could make some noise, and you're getting Pletcher at a price, which is, you know, I guess there are worse bets to make.
We should pick up the pace here just a little bit after my little 2-minute aside on Mo D'Amour, Jonathan, but did you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I'm going to fade her, but I tell you what, it makes me a little bit nervous when I see a King of Prussia stable, Todd Pletcher horse. It's not being ridden by Johnny V or Javier Castellano in the Gazelle last time. It's going to be 30 to 1. So I'm fading her, but it makes me nervous. It looks exactly like Princess of Silmar.
Number 8 is Royal Obsession. I thought had a pretty tough trip last time. Bumped around at the break, in between and behind most of the race, took a lot of kickback, and then galloped out the best. I was thinking very interesting at 20 to 1. Anything to dissuade me from that, Mike?
No, you know, and this is one that they liked enough that they actually nominated her to the Triple Crown. So, you know, she's by Tappet. She sold for over $1 million. Obviously, they had really, really big plans for her, and she could move forward in the second start off the layoff. I like her a little more than Lewis Bay, and you're going to get a much better price.
Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I think she's one of the Stone Streets she's the Stone Street that of the other, you know, the rail horse. I can't remember the name. I've already forgot, but
Terra Promessa.
Yeah, Terra Promessa.
Come on, this is the Kentucky Oaks, Jonathan. Get your head in the game.
No, that's my fault.
This is the 8th at Hawthorne on a Thursday. You got to know the horses' names.
You're right. I tell you what, though, I will hope that Stone Street's going to help out our buddy Travis Stone and wear different hats or something to help him sort through the 3 yellow silks with the burgundy V going down. So hopefully they'll help him out with different caps.
Yeah, I don't know what I've seen in the past with that, but it would certainly, I think a white cap and a red cap and a yellow cap would look pretty good. Just my 2 cents. Number 9, Paola Queen. Not sure we have too much that we need to talk about with her, but certainly pace factor. I was thinking that Go Maggie Go would be in front this time simply because Go Maggie Go's inside of her. Am I selling her short by thinking of her as just a pace factor, Jonathan?
Yeah, I just think that, you know, no, there's nothing really to discuss here. I mean, I think she's one that she'll get run over late by these other horses, and congratulations to the Connections for getting her here, and obviously I would run her too if I owned her, but I think it's going to be a pretty tough spot for
her. I agree she's a pace factor. I actually think she will be on the lead. I don't think she's good enough to win, but I think if you're looking for, as we've talked, you know, how we handicap races, if you're looking for who's going to be on the lead at the first call, I think it's going to be her.
Number 10, Venus Valentine, the filly with the name of an adult film star. Her claim to fame came 2 back in the Rachel Alexandra, where she rode that rail that many, I'm going to go ahead and say, assume was gold into victory. I think that was pretty much the time you wanted to have Venus Valentine, but can you see her playing a starring role in the Kentucky Oaks, Mike?
Probably not. But anybody that likes her, you're going to get a big price. I don't know if you're going to get as much as you got in the Rachel Alexandra, but you know, she'll be a big price. They're putting the blinkers on, so she maybe won't be as far off the pace as she's been in previous starts. I just don't know if she's good enough to beat these, though.
Just any dissenting opinion, Jonathan?
100% fade. Next.
Number 11 is Rachel's Valentina. A lot of ink has been spilled, a lot of words spoken about how impressive she's been in her short career. Bred to the absolute purple, made that move into the hot pace last time. Just got done on the line by Weep No More, second off the layoff here. An obvious A, if not an A+ for me. Jonathan, am I being too optimistic about this Stone Street Stables runner?
No, not at all. And I think it's important to keep in mind for everyone who's going to be participating, her win price is going to not be relative I think, accurately to her price in multis and her price in like the trifecta on top, just because she's going to get crushed by the $2 better in all facets of the you can imagine, based on her name, and then when they find out that it's Rachel's daughter and all of that stuff, she's going to get crushed. And so, the draw is not ideal. This feels a lot like dreaming of Julia to me, like where she was supposed to win, but if she misses the break, then she's up against it from the start. I think she ran the best last race. I think she's supposed to win this race if she can get a clean trip, but I think that you're supposed to bet against her at the price you're going to get, and for such an evenly matched field outside of her.
Mike, how are you going to bet Rachel's Valentina in this race?
I would say she's an A, but she's probably not a lone A. I think she's maybe arguably the most likely winner, but I think Jonathan's right. She's going to be lower than the 7-2 morning line. She may be 2-1, and I don't know.
Shorter than that, in my opinion, in the win pool. I really do. I think Jonathan nailed it. You get a lot of money. You get some uninformed money on Oaks and Derby Day. I mean, we've seen it in the past. Horses. We've talked about it on the show too. Horses with sort of stories attached, going off at just much lower prices than they ought to be. She's had a habit of getting pounded at the windows, and I think she's going to be, 8-5, I would think. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I think it's going to go. But I think Jonathan's also right. There's a chance to, in more sophisticated betting approaches, get probably a lot closer to that 7-2.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, she was 5-2 in a 5-horse field last time, and she's facing two of the same rivals, one of whom was the 1-2 favorite. I don't think you're gonna, I agree she'll be bet more heavily than Catherine Sophia, but I don't know. In a bigger field, 14-horse field, I think she may be 2-1, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys are right on her.
Number 12 is Catherine Sophia, who also ran a pretty big race last time in the Ashland. Very interesting here how once Songbird defected, suddenly the connections thought Catherine Sophia would run farther.
Yeah, no, that's your piece that you wrote yesterday where you talked about big racing days. This is one of the reasons that I like big racing days, is because this was the fourth at like you said, Hawthorne on a Wednesday. You wouldn't know all this information. That the trainer wasn't going to come here. He was going to cut her back. He was going to, and he had made that decision, and she ran like a horse that doesn't want to run that much further in the Ashland. And now they're asking her to do it again from an outside post where she's going to lose ground at some point of the race. You'd like to think she's a forwardly placed horse, so she's going to lose ground. She's going to be wide, and now we're expected to re-embrace her after the connections have made a change in plans. I think she's possibly the most talented filly in the race, but she's the type that I'm going to have to use. I mean, I'm going to use her second and third, but I'm going to kind of fade her here a little bit. She'll probably be a B horse for me.
Mike, will you use Catherine Sophia on top?
Probably similar to Jonathan. I think I look at her last race a little more favorably. I would imagine that the reason why they were trying to call an audible was more about the presence of Songbird than about the distance to some extent, because even though she tired a little bit last race, it was her first time going 2 turns. She made a little bit of an early move into in a fair pace, and as Jonathan mentioned, it kind of sped up in the internal fractions. It's an effort that normally, all things being equal, normally I would forgive and look to bet going forward. But I don't know if she's more likely than, say, Rachel's Valentina.
Landover C, number 13, is going to take an absolute ton of money. She, more than anyone else, probably connections, I don't want to say happy to see Songbird not in the race, but selfishly happy that Songbird's not in the race after all the time she spent chasing that one's backside last year, and earlier this year for that matter. The post gives a little bit of a concern to me. Obviously in danger of being hung out wide here. If I make her an A, I think I'm going to have a little bit of reservation about that, but I think I'm going to have to, I may come around to having to do that just based on the form and the figures and the overall resume. Is that the same for you, Mike?
I'm generally kind of against her. I'm more against her than I am, say, Catherine Sophia. I think she will get bet. I think connections will be part of it. I think people will see how she runs really well when she's not facing Songbird. But you still have to deal with the fact that she ran behind a lot of these in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. The horses she finished ahead of in the Songbird races, I don't think even are nearly as good as what she's facing on Friday. Based on the amount of money she's going to take in all the pools, I think she's an underlay. That said, I'd probably just knocked her into the winner's circle.
Jonathan, where are you with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I like her. I mean, I think she's a good filly, but she's just one of those that just doesn't get me going enough to like get excited and to feel like I have to be include or use. And I think that she has to be respected, of course, but I just feel like at the price she's going to be, and from that post, there's just so many other horses that create so much more value. I mean, for instance, I was just looking back at Royal Obsession. Like, I think if you had to if I had to have one of these horses as A horses, I think I would rather have Royal Obsession than Land Over Sea. Just, it's just I don't know. I feel really wishy-washy about her, but she just doesn't get me going.
That is true. That is as wishy-washy as I've ever heard you on the show, except when I asked you to pick between Rachel Alexandra and Zenyatta. But all that said, I take Mike's point about her that the form isn't exactly great. But gosh, I mean, as much those races to Songbird though, they're still pretty darn good races, especially if you accept that Songbird was going to be whatever 1-2 in this race. I just don't think I want this race to have happened, and I'm in a worse position for not having her as an A, even just looking at it for another second and hearing you guys talk. I think she's just a sort of a straight, and I agree with Jonathan's point about that I would much rather be risking money when it comes to one like Royal Obsession, who's going to be a much bigger number. But, I mean, you really want to get beat by this horse? Doesn't she kind of have to be an A by default, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably just talking tough because it's Wednesday morning and I'll probably use her as an A horse. But I just, it's just, I don't like using horses as A horses where I say, I guess I'll use it as an A horse. I feel like that's just bad betting. And so I try not to do that, but sometimes I do. If I have a couple of Oaks or Lilies before I place my bet, I'll probably use her. But it just depends.
I think sometimes that's where I like the concept of the A+ in betting, where you can have, because I agree, like I can't really use Land Over Sea the same amount as I'm using Rachel's Valentina, but just if you're sort of accepting the basics of the AB ticket maker ticket structure, sometimes I'll go ahead and do that almost like farming out my bet structure to ticket maker for 80% of the bet or whatever, and then come back with another play where I'm really pressing the ones who I really, really like into almost like of an A+ role. So when I talk about A+, that's what I mean. Mike, you had something here?
Yeah, what I would say, and I think you like her more than I do, but if I liked her as much as you were making the case for her, what I would do is I would look at my other legs and see what kind of value I felt I was going to get. So I wouldn't use her as an A with other shorter priced horses, but if I've got a stronger opinion or I like long shots in other legs, then I might do a second ticket where I'm elevating her from a B to an A, just to make sure if those long shots come in, I'm adequately covered. But if I've got, favorite, second choice, favorite in the other legs, and I don't love a horse like this who I'm kind of wishy-washy, I'm with Jonathan. I'll downgrade her to a B and be fine with that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, trying to look at the overall composition of your tickets and what they're going to pay. So let's just do number 14 and 15 in one fell swoop here as we're running out of time. Dothraki Queen stuck on the AE list right now. Number 14 is Taxable for Steve Asmussen. That was a tricky trip last time, as I recall. But I mean, just that the fantasy isn't the race that I'm looking to bet horses out of here, and I didn't really come up with. Wasn't sure if she was really fast enough. Am I overlooking something on Taxable?
I mean, no, I don't think so.
The boy Mike Smith.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna as we'll find out tomorrow. I'm gonna save all my Mike Smith, my Mike Smith juju for Saturday. So,
Little bit of a hint, little foreshadowing there.
yeah. So
If there were an Oaks future wager on jockeys, Mike Smith would be what, 1-2, right?
Whatever Songbird was in the last duel. Mike, how about you? Anything on either of these two outsiders?
Not really. I think outsiders are a good explanation or a good term for both of them. I don't really love either of them.
All right. Well, that was our full look at the Oaks. Folks, let us know if you enjoyed the horse-by-horse approach. It's something we could do more for big races. We always have so much to talk about that we don't get to go into that level of detail, but I think it's kind of fun once in a while, and I think it gives you a little more of a window into the handicapping process, a la that excellent question that our friend Jamal Barnett asked us last week. I think that's it, guys. Any closing thoughts before I send us home here, or we'll just see everybody tomorrow?
I do have one. We'll be doing the podcast again tomorrow, but also, Pete, you and I will be doing a webinar with Stephen Christ and Andrew Beyer. So if you're listening to this, there's still time to. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, there's still time to sign up. It's Thursday a.m. 11 a.m. Eastern time. You'll see the marquee on DRF.com. I'm sure Pete and I we'll be tweeting that out. So be sure and check that out. If you miss it, of course, we'll archive that and post it to YouTube. DRF.com/YouTube is the place to go for that.
Yeah, lots of good material there at the DRF.com/YouTube. Folks can check out previous webinars, and that one certainly will be of interest, not for anything me and Mike have to say, but just to listen to Andy Beyer and Stephen Christ, two revolutionary handicappers and bettors who you can't help but learn something from every time they talk. So do sign up for that and check it out. As for today's show, that's all we got. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. Thank you to Jonathon Kinchen. Thank you to Mike Hogan. Thanks to all of you. We're back tomorrow. May you win all your photos.